Can you go? Yes, sila. Are we ready? Okay, saya mula.
Yep, okay.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Pada hari ini alhamdulillah kita dapat bersama untuk kali ke-8 untuk tahun ni membicarakan buku-buku yang menarik di petang Sabtu yang berbahagia dan sejahtera ini. Dan walaupun ada di antara kita yang mungkin berehat ketika ini, tapi yang penting di mana ada kesempatan kita belajar. Sebelum kita mula ni Prof Zaini, kita bincang tentang beberapa insiden berkaitan dengan bencana di Malaysia yang berlaku semalam. Bencana air, seorang wanita India jatuh tiba-tiba dalam apa ni? Dalam longkang. Ya, bukan tanah jelus, longkang.
Longkang. Oh.
It's,
Underground longkang.
Underground. So saya sempat explain tadi, itu adalah fenomena apa yang kita sebut sebagai crown corrosion. Itu cerita lain lah, tapi tak ada dalam kitab ni lah. Jadi siapa nak lebih mendalam, bacalah buku yang ditulis oleh penulis-penulis ini, air dan pementungan di Malaysia. Ada buku Inggeris juga, Water and Sewerage Management in Malaysia. Ya, kita bincang. Yang nak ditekankan ialah kita perlukan ilmu untuk memahami pelbagai persekitaran. Apabila sesuatu berlaku, tak adalah hantu bawah tu tiba-tiba muncul atau raksasa dan nak bangun dan sebagainya. Itu semua mitos-mitos yang mungkin boleh dapat kita sangkal apabila kita ada ilmu yang jelas. Jadi pada hari ini kita nak bincang tentang ilmu berkaitan dengan al-Raniri dan Prologue yang dibuat oleh Profesor Zaini. Ini kali ketiga kita bincang buku Prologue. Kita tak bincang buku yang tebal ni. Kita bincang buku yang nipis mengiringi buku yang tebal ni. Ya. Jadi sambil-sambil tu kita juga merujuk kepada buku yang tebal yang ditulis oleh Profesor Syed Nakib Alatas kira-kira 40 tahun yang lalu, 40 years ago. Ya. So di kesempatan ini saya menjemput Profesor Zaini untuk meneruskan pengajian kita. Sila.
A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Salatu wassalamu syafi'il anbiya wassalamu alaihi wasahbihi ajmain. Syukri, the volume is okay, yeah? Thank you. First and foremost, Dato Seri, we have to switch language because it's a different book. And so, is this the third or the second meeting? Third.
Third meeting.
Okay, all right. Now, so we have to go into a little bit of a more substantial thing. But just wanting to show you, as a matter of recuperation, to recoup, to recall what we were talking about, this big book is actually a reprint of another edition that was published by the Ministry of Culture. And it has its own history. So in the prologue, I want to emphasize, it's a thick book. To write another commentary, it will be even bigger. This is the first edition of the book, right? But this first edition is actually the commentary on this, right? The commentary on this. This was published by Professor Latas, by Jamras. And this is the published version, the printed version of his master thesis, which was done at McGill, and in the acknowledgement he mentioned here that this is where he met Fazlur Rahman. At that time was a associate professor at McGill, but he was also a professor at the Institute of Islamic Research in Karachi, Pakistan, that was established by Ayub Khan. So we have a series of institutes that was established by great Muslim leaders We have the Iranian Imperial Academy of Philosophy. We have the Institute of Islamic Research. And lastly, I think the attempt by Professor Latas to build and to establish ISTAC, the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, which later on was carried on with a smaller scale by Dato Sri Zaini Ujang at the Rajazari Center for Islam, Science and Civilization, Advanced Studies. So this is quite an interesting progress. The reason why I mention this is because scholars, they build institutions. And behind great scholars, or what drives them, are great ideas. And these are something that, for example, we know the ideas of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and we know the great ideas of our great ulama, Shafi'i, Hanbali, Maliki. They are institutions themselves, you see. Institutions may not be physical in that matter, because the great ideas are the one that sustains institutions. You can have buildings, but without ideas, they're just going to become empty buildings. In fact, buildings which has no life at all. The discussion will be very dry and does not build up great men with great ideas. And this is what we can see with Dato Sri Zaini has experienced great universities in the West and even in Japan in the East. They house great scholars, and they always want to bring in great scholars, because great scholars, they don't give birth ideas every day. Sometimes, like Einstein, he said he has only 2 great ideas. You know, the rest just building it up. And building it up, it's just like writing a book. You have to first make a draft, and you should not be satisfied with it. Give it some time, sometimes 10 years before it's actually came out. You see, but Professor Latas is different. He is a man gifted with something extraordinary, and this is what I mentioned in this book in the chapter on a summary of Latas's commentary on Hujjat al-Siddiq. It is a prologue, as I said. This is a prologue, so I give a very like scratching the surface of what he talks about, and primarily trying to introduce to you the genesis of the idea. Professor Latas was first sort of attracted to the idea of great Sufi ideas when he was a cadet at Sandhurst. And this is where the function of great libraries, Dato Sri, that support great institutions. In a place where generals, leaders, military strategies are being trained, there is a corner called Wisdom of the East. And that's where he was first introduced. He started to read Jami's Lawa'ih. It's a Persian work, it's a poetry. It was translated into English by I think it's E.H. Winfield, if I'm not mistaken, the person also who translated Mishkatul Anwar of Ghazali. Lawa'ih is a very heavy, thoroughgoing metaphysical poetry, and this is why something is missing now in the literature world of the Muslim today. We used to have, prior to the Iraqi invasion, 1991, I think, in Iraq, they used to have regular meeting of Arabic poetry, the readings of Arabic poetry. Now, no more, because there's no host to host such a thing. And great works, the distillation of ideas requires a safe environment to do it. Again, safety doesn't mean complete safety entirely, but the poet, the scholars, the great man with ideas must be given his haven of security. So, and this is why Professor Latas' growth in ideas, as I tried to follow them as I could, is quite fascinating to me. He first translated Rubaiyat wa Khayyam when he was in the early 20s. When he was a cadet, he was only in his 20s. And he mentioned, for example, when he was writing his thesis for the PhD, which is this, so you can imagine, this man don't work in small sizes. His man is, and no wonder Sultan Taqdir Ali Shahbana says that he is a man, he's an ocean of knowledge. That is the nature of a man gifted with something. The rest are just bayan for him, explanation. And this is why sometimes for him to give explanatory exposition of something, he has to have the right students. Dato Seri. You cannot just bring in people who are not prepared, just like, advanced calculus. You cannot just teach people. And this is why I tried to retrace the progression of his outputs, not his birth or maturity of ideas. I think these are his production of the ideas to make us understand. Because I remember reading, and he did mention here, I mentioned it here, the reason why he wrote Sufism as understood and practiced by the Malays, it was just a BA practice, a BA thesis. And said this is not meant to be a thoroughgoing exposition of Sufi, tasawwuf, metaphysical ideas or philosophical mysticism. It will be elaborated later, you see. And the same thing with this, when he mentioned in the monograph of Hujjat al-Siddiq, the whole ideas, because in this work, the subtitle is A Critical Study of Nuruddin Raniri's Refutation of Hamzah Fansuri's Mystical Philosophy, based on Raniri's Hujjat al-Siddiq, Lidaf al-Zindiq, and Tibyan fi Ma'rifati Adyan, and other Malay sources. And he did mention here is that he will give greater exposition to the ideas of Fansuri in another book. And this you have it.
This one.
No, this is the greater ideas of
yeah.
Fansuri. And then he says, to write a greater exposition. Why to write a greater exposition of Raniri's idea? Because when this book was published, it caught the attention of the Arabic professor in Netherlands by the name of Drewes. Drewes wrote comments on the re-examination of, Drewes wrote on the re-examination of Raniri's Hujjat al-Siddiq. Okay? Drewes wrote an article in Jamras commenting on this. And it was a few pages. Professor Latas wrote this much of a refutation against it. And he said, even here, this is not for the whole exposition of Hujjat al-Siddiq. He will write it in another place. And the result is this one. Yeah. The result is this one. And this is why I said, Professor Latas is gifted with that knowledge because he wants to write an exposition. And as I can see, as I mentioned it here, from my reading, and I've been going through the Sufism practice understood by the Malays, as understood and practiced by the Malays, even at the age of 20-something, he has understood a span of major ideas in Tasawwuf, not just Raniri. Because Raniri, you must see his intellectual network, the spiritual and intellectual genealogy. And it is not just unilinear. It's not one line. It goes back to Jawi, to Ibn Arabi, to Ghazali, which means this is a man of wide exposition. And remember, as I mentioned also in here, one of Professor Latas' ancestors initiated Raniri in one of the tariqah. So you see, the connection is not only ideas, but also spiritual and intellectual in terms of there's a historical line to it. Just like, people talk about who are their teachers, right? So this is a very fascinating thing. And the main thrust, what is it all for? There seems to be a major misunderstanding. And that misunderstanding is the concept of existence. This might be a little bit difficult for us to actually get at first instance, because what is this thing about existence? Why do we worry about existence? There are people who study, Muslim scholars, Muslim ulama, who are into this field. Generally, this discussion of wujud falls into what is called as wujudiyah. People who fall or discuss about wujud. Now, the wujudiyah, erroneously translated into English, becomes existentialist. Because Western existentialists like Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, they are not the level of these people talking about. I'll give you an example. If you want to see the most recent minute representation of Jean-Paul Sartre's idea of existential question, you should watch this recent movie on Netflix called Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris.
Oh, kita pergi Paris lah lepas ni.
She met two characters in the movie. One is a model for Dior. Thank you. You must have watched it.
Oh.
Christian Dior.
Christian Dior.
And the man who works for the office.
Andre.
Andre. Both of them were reading Jean-Paul Sartre. And the book is Being and Existence. Being and Nothingness, sorry. The question is, existentialism in the West is talking about what is the meaning of this existence. Without this existence, is there something called nothingness? And this is why Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I exist, you see. But our question of existence, according to the ulama of the Sufis, goes back to the nature of what is called absolute existence, which is appended to or ascribed to or denoted to Allah SWT, because He possesses existence. So never equate. There may be instances of common themes, common discussions about it, but the nature of our discussion of existence is entirely different and entirely at a different level. And this is why it's very important for all of us to look at the illustration that I put here of Professor Latta's degrees of existence. What is it called? The ontological descent. Where is that page? That's very important for us to capture.
22.
20?
2.
22. Thank you, Dato. The level of existence that Sartre and others talking about at the level, the most lowest, Dato, the fifth. Yeah. So
Exterior.
the exterior existence. We are talking about all the levels that goes to what is called ta'ayyuna and taqayyudat, what is called tajalli. These are called manifestations of existence. And remember, we talked about there's existence that can be seen, there's existence that cannot be seen. Like our soul exists, cannot be seen. Our body exists, it can be seen. Our soul exists, cannot be seen, but to a certain degree can be felt, meaning internally. And that is what the Sufis call dhawqiyah. And that is why inside, internally, the soul has its own faculties to function, as our physical bodies have faculties to function. We smell, we taste, we touch, we see, we hear, right? But inside, the soul also must have its faculties in order for it to function. And this is why the Sufis is talking about actually experiencing internally of all these things. And this is what is described as wijdan, intuition of existence. And that is the function of the soul. That the problem is many of us are not aware of this, because it is so-called, I'm sorry, I don't want to use the word deep. It is a different level of functioning. The best example I can give you is this. This world functions. We just take it for granted. But for scientists, they don't take it for granted. They wanted to analyze how this world works. And they come up with, or they discovered, so-called, they say discovered laws, universal laws. Actually, they didn't discover, it has been there all the time, right? So they just managed to summarize it. Now, the point is, how many of us aware of the so-called universal laws, the law of gravity, the speed of light? We are not aware of it, but it works. So even scientists, they are aware of it, but it has to be in the background. Because if you are aware of it, life is going to get very, very unsettling. Just like Professor Latas was saying, imagine we have eyes of the eagles. Wow, I don't think we are going to be inhabiting homes like this. Our homes will be, way up high. Would there be civilization? Wallahu alam, it will be a different thing altogether. And this is why this is what Professor Latas in the interview with Hamza Yusuf, he says, even birds have not flown higher than man. You see? Because of the intelligence that we have. And this intelligence is by virtue of the internal faculties that we have. We are able to sort of break the limits of nature. And this is why, and how we did that, and this is why it's fascinating. It has its so-called allied discoveries. One of the allied discoveries, you have allied sciences, I call it allied discoveries, and tributary discoveries. What Professor Latas wrote, The Nature of Man. How he discusses the nature of the psychology of the man, the nature and the psychology, nature and psychology of man. Isn't it? The title of it. It is entirely different from the Western conception of psychology. See? Psychology, basically, if you look Western psychology, they always ascribe to amongst its founders, Freud, Jung, because it's entirely different from the real psychology. The real psychology was discussed by Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, by the Muslim scholars when they talk about the anima, the nature of the soul. But when you get to Jung and Freud, it's more about dealing with problems associated with what they call the soul, isn't it? And which now later on has been described as mental problems or mental issues. Now, mental health, just to make it less stigmatized. Because you don't talk about the real things. This is why, Dato, you were prefacing this discussion with what is happening in Jalan Masjid, India. That's not the condition of Kuala Lumpur. The Kuala Lumpur that we know is the beauty side of Jalan Tun Abdul Razak, Tunku Abdul Rahman, all the beauty roads, right? Regardless of the jams. It's nightmarish. In fact, everyone in a car, as sometimes I joke, when you want to drive in Kuala Lumpur, make sure you have a bag full of curses. Then you can survive. At least you can vent your anger. But that is not Kuala Lumpur, isn't it? So you see the beauty of it. And this is why great philosophers, great metaphysicians and Sufis, they talk about the nature of the soul, the beautiful side of the soul. And of course, Muslim ulama wrote about the maladies of the soul, like Zaid Balkhi wrote. You have other great Muslim so-called psychologists wrote about the problems associated with the soul. And this is what this whole discussion is all about. Because why is the discussion on existence is important? In as much as Sartre tried to make sense of this life, right, which is very physical in nature, and Descartes to a certain point wants to make sense of what is really nature of man inside, so that you don't get a very perturbed idea, who am I? Otherwise, it's an imagination world of dreams or whatever. That's why they talk about Plato's, cave and things like that. We talk about real things. So for us, at every level of existences, it is true and real. And this is why in Islam we talked about even your words will be weighted on the Day of Judgment. And this is why, as I said, in Arabic, verbs are called wazan. They are based on the wazan. Wazan is the measure of weight. See? So this is why this existence is very important, and the confusion occurs here because, again, this is to put it in a very simple manner as opposed to going into very detail about it. There are two, Raniri mentioned there are two groups of the Wujudiyah in as much as the Muslims are concerned. The erroneous one, he calls them Wujudiyah Mulhidah Zindiq, and this is why he wrote this book, Hujjat al-Siddiq li Daf'i Zindiq. Okay? The reason why Zindiq is being used is because of the nature of duality. And this is why, as I said earlier, the word Zandaqa originally is a Persian word to remind us that this is Zoroastrian in nature, understanding of duality of good and evil, right? Because the idea of, and this is what Raniri says about the commonality, the similarities between the wrong ideas of Hamza Fansuri with that of the others in the world of ideas. One is that they say God's existence is the same as the creature's existence, because if everything comes from God, then we must begin in God, right? And therefore we are God, we are divine. No, that's not what the real Wujudiyah is saying. The real Wujudiyah is saying, as Dato, if you look at that, going through down different levels, the highest one, the highest level, what is called non-manifestation. That is called in Arabic al-ama. Al-ama. Bukan not al-ama. Professor Latas mentioned, even Orientalists read this wrongly. Some read it as al-ama, the blindness. But it's actually al-ama, it means the dark mist. In Arabic, the dark mist means it is that's about to burst, almost giving you an impression like, you know, it's a condensed matter that's going to burst into like a big bang. Allahu A'lam. I leave that to your imagination, right? Maybe future research may come up with something. But that's what the difference in meaning. Al-ama is blind, because ummi means cannot see. Ama. So al-ama with Hamza, that means a dark mist. So that is associated with existence that is not yet taken any degrees of what is called determination. The other level of determination is when there are names and attributes associated with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And that is where we know Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. This is why in the Quran and the Sufis mention about why we don't know the that of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, because وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ. See, God warns you against knowing His self, so to speak. But the word self here, and this is why we must know a little bit of Arabic, it means Him in His being. Of course, it is beyond us. And this is why the Sufis there wrote, we don't know this one. It is beyond us. So the Wujudiyah, the Raniri group, Ibn Arabi, Al-Ghazali, and I mentioned here, Professor Latas mentioned the list of the so-called Wujudiyah, which is on the right track. They hold on to the idea that this at the level of Asma wa Sifa, it is that level that we know Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala as Ilah. Beyond that, we don't know. And this is why some people, using this argument, saying, well, you see, we all believe in the same God. Even maybe the Hindu Brahmins say, we believe in God which has no attribute. You see? But no, that's not it is, because we have a God at the level of worship. And this is why our nature of worship is different. See? We don't worship the unknowable God. We worship that God has names and attributes. He has His name, Allah. And that is why we cannot say, oh, there is a level of ahadiyah that God is not known, therefore we worship that God. No, we worship God that has a name. See? And this is why to Moses, you know, Inni anallah. Inni anallah. You see? And then he said, Inni Rabbul Alameen. So those are his sifa. Just like, for example, in the house, Dato Zaini is known not as the KSU. He doesn't go around the house, I'm the KSU here. It doesn't work.
TKSU.
Yeah. He comes home, you know, he will be the father. For some, he's the biological ATM machine. I'm sorry. Emergency withdrawals, you know. That's what it is, you see. So how do you know Dato Zaini? You know him at that level. You don't know him, you know, I don't know, all of us don't know his spirit, the unseen part, you see. And that's why this is why in this, in the book Islam Covenants Fulfilled, and in many other aspects of Muslim works on kalam, Muslim works on tasawwuf, and there's also Muslim works on hadith. Very interestingly, Dr. Hilmi, remember Castellani's Irshad al-Sari fi Sharh Sahih Bukhari. There's always be a discussion on Sifa and Mawsuf. And this is why the name Allah Ta'ala is specifically His own. Just again, sorry to say about Satr, but it's very important. He said the essence of something, the essence of anything, is a combination of its attended adjectives, you know. That in one way we can agree of knowing something. This is why in Western existentialists, they talk about phenomenologies, right? And then Kant talked about the noumena, which is what is in the mind, and the phenomena, which is outside the phenomenologies. So how do you know the essence of something? Like this book, as opposed to that book, the difference is in the color. Prosalatas use always the same font, but it's in the color. So these are attributes that make it different. And this is why Allah Ta'ala's attributes are different. And this is why our conception of God, which is ilah, the conception of ilah is entirely different. We worship Allah, not we worship Rabb that has no name. That's not it. That's very important. And this is why it's very important. Raniri wants to say that subtle discussion. Wujud of Allah Ta'ala's wujud, although the discussion, in the process of the discussion, there are terms, istilah, in order to break down the philosophical and theological discussion. Common terms are being used, but there are always different meanings associated with it. And this is why it's very important for us to have a good dictionary when we are dealing with these things. So the Sufis have their own istilahat, terminologies, and they are mutakallim, they have their own terminologies. And unfortunately, some of these great works are no longer in current use. They are used by those who are experts in them. It'd be nice. Well, I would just say, learn Arabic and Persian. The best dictionaries on this matter is, I think it's Lataiful I'lam by Kashani. It's a very comprehensive work. So, and this is why I mentioned here, Prosalatas, in this whole discussion, because this is what Raniri has to do in order to break the problem, the enigma of existence, because it touches the existence being discussed by the philosophers. So he must bring philosophical terms. And that is why some people accuse Tasawwuf has been Greek influence. Then the same thing, I think now people are accusing the Ash'ariyah has been influenced by the philosophers. No. You see, as I was saying in our last meeting, mathematics developed by the Indians, for example, the numerical. It was not used. It was used by the Indians until one fine day, going back to the history of mathematics, and someone here might be an expert, can correct me. An ambassador in an open market in Morocco, I think it was in Marrakesh, saw the Muslim doing transactions faster than the Europeans. This was way back in, I think, 11th century. And he was asking how they do this. They were using different system, numeral system, compared to the Romans. And this guy brought back the system to Italy, and eventually they used the system. This is why it's called Arabic numerals. It actually was invented by the Indians, you see. So the name is something very important for us to understand. And this is why these attributes of, for example, numbers, It is something that we must understand. And this is what Raniri is trying to do. He's trying to make clear that whatever discussions in the realm of ideas coming from different civilizations must be filtered, because we are human beings. We come into contact with each other. Otherwise, we cannot talk. There cannot be an exchange of ideas. There cannot be, what is that word in English? In Malay, we call pemurnian dan penjernihan faham. You see? It's very important. And I think this is what Islam came, the message of Islam, is to clarify the idea of Tawheed. Tawheed is actually the process of making something one, but not number one. See? Well, the word is wahada, you know. To actually, and I mentioned in my translation of Raniri's Lata'if, the word Tawheed doesn't mean God's unity, because that is somehow referring in our mental understanding that God is one. But no, what it means is for us to actually trying in all earnesty, within all these myriads of forces, colors, sounds, smell, taste, they all come from one cause. That's very difficult. And this is why it is put in the second form, wahada. And I translated Tawheed is the affirmation of God's unity. It is more on the effort, not on the status of God. So Tawheed is actually for us to live by and to live according to. And that's very difficult. And this is why, for example, we Muslims, to begin something, Bismillah. To end something, Alhamdulillah. You come something with a problem, MashaAllah. And then something happens, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. You return. That is the process of living Tawheed. And this is why it's so anti or against the idea of what is called monism and pantheism, the ideas of the wrong understanding of wujudiyah that has been misunderstood from Hamzah Fansuri's line of teaching. Because of that, because of, he was saying another problem with Hamzah Fansuri is the idea that because if you think that existence is all one, then you are ipso facto, by virtue of that, you automatically will believe in tanasukhiyah, metempsychosis, because they're all the same. So your soul can come and live in my body, another jinn can come and take over my body, another so-called ghost that do not exist suddenly inhabit somebody else's body. And this is why if you understand really the understanding of the true wujudiyah, there's no rasuk-rasuk, there's no tanasukhiyah, there's no metempsychosis, there's no returning back. Again, so this is our belief, and if there are other people who belong to other religious tradition who may not agree, then let us say that we disagree here, because in Islam, the soul is created for each body, specific body. You see, this is why, as I said, Dato is Seri Zainiy Ujang. We have two equal, same name, but different persons. Because he is imbued with different spirits. Meaning spirits, I mean capacities, akhlaq. Okay, he has different degree of compassion. He has different degree of anger, different degree of knowledge. So this is how we differ. See, even complexion, we're not the same. And so this is what Raniri is trying to do, and this is what the discussion among what is called the true wujudiyah as opposed to the false wujudiyah. It's very important. People might think that this is philosophy. We might not need it. No. Otherwise, great scholars would not have busied themselves if this is not important. I mentioned here, Professor Latta says there's a theoretical and practical aspect of what is called, well, generally life. Yeah. And therefore, in higher regards, in as much as our religion is concerned, for example, even in fiqh, you have the theoretical, you have the practical, right? So the theoretical, you have to have this something that guides it. There are uslub to that, right? The reason why I'm saying this is there seems to be a problem now that whenever we talk about something theoretical, we fall into using the word falsafah something. The philosophy of this, suddenly you have falsafah da'wah. No, it's not. There's no such thing as falsafah da'wah. There's philosophy of da'wah. There's maqasid. And this is why our great ulama wrote maqasidu, falasifa. They don't write the philosophy of the philosophers. For some reason, now we write books falsafah da'wah. Na'udzubillah, we write books falsafah salat. That would be the wrong thing. That is the wrong part of trying to say we have turned everything into Greek. Because Wujudiyah of the Raniri kind, Ghazali kind, Ibn Arabi kind has been trying to kick off this falasifa. But now, everybody, even, I'm sorry if that's from Jakim or whatever, using this word. Which is wrong, You can have falsafah pendidikan, yes. But, you don't say falsafah puasa.
Hikmah puasa.
Hikmah puasa, yes.
Yeah.
The hikmah is behind the maqasid.
Yeah.
You see? Now I have demonstrated to you why the discussion that Raniri wants to go at, the idea of wujudiyah. It's very important to understand this discourse. And this is why you get, ma huwa bihi shay'un, There is ma bihi shay'un huwa and ma bihi shay'un yakun. It's entirely different. It sounds Arabic very similar, but they're different, you see. And this is why Proselatas has spent this much. And even that, it's not exhaustive yet. He wrote this, Dato Seri, trying to comment on only 22 lines of major ideas in the Hujjat al-Siddiq. It's a very short treatise. Is he making things more difficult? No, I don't think so. Mathematics, you look at, it goes into tomes and tomes, just to explain something. So
Tanya ni,
yes,
yang these three level. I shared the page in our chat group. Di sini 192, ni 172. This is 192 lah, kebetulan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Page number. This is the new book. 192 new book. So yang Hamzah Fansuri ni which level? He is talking.
The fifth level.
Hamzah Fansuri is talking about the fifth determination.
Yes, because the problem is that he understood this, but he equates them with the level of existence here. He understands this, but he equates them. And this is what I want to explain. You cannot equate because there are different levels. All right? He may understand the other levels of the higher ones, but to say that wujud Allah is the same as wujud makhluk, no, because they have to be with degrees, you see. That's the degree of it. This is why Raniri says, wujud Allah qa'imun bi nafsihi wa muqimun li ghairihi. It is self-subsisting and then it makes others exist. Our existence cannot do that. We cannot give existence to others, Although you might have this wrong idea that, ibulah yang membawa saya ke dunia ini. Careful, kadang-kadang that can tantamount to syirik,
Kalau seseorang tu mati,
yeah,
they still exist lah.
they exist because the soul exists.
The soul exists. There is different level of
Existence. And this is why they are in the realm of what is called alam barzakh.
Alam barzakh. So they are still exist.
Yeah. And this is what we we Muslim would call parallel existence, parallel world. And this is what we mean by Rabbul Alamin, that Raniri and Prof Alatas mentioned here, Tuhan Sarwa Alam Berganda. Alam Berganda, this is what it is. Yeah. So we believe in the world of our angels, yeah, and then we believe in the world of spirits. And this is what Barzakh, yes, Kusni.
So it's parallel world and not multiverse.
It's parallel world, not multiverse. Yeah, not multiverse.
Parallel to means
Meaning it existing concurrently.
concurrently.
Yeah. They have their own world on their own. The same thing with jinns and others, other creatures that belongs to the unseen world. They exist. Yeah. And they may be have a purview, a view into what we are doing. Like for example, the people in you know what is called alam kubur, they can see, but we cannot see them. So it's a parallel universe. Yeah. But again, the universe there is not universe in terms of physical. Yeah. Yeah. It's existence, parallel existences. Better to use. Okay, I want to share something, because how do we get these things? All right. On page 19, it's very important for us to understand. You see, at the level of what is called first separation, we are separated from objects that we know. Dato Seri, we look at this book. This is called separation, physical separation. And in fact, we are conscious of that separation. We are very conscious of that separation. This is called first level of separation. When we want to think about something, we must have something other. See, if it's something in us, then are we conscious of it? Just like, for example, I was saying earlier, are we conscious of our soul? The answer is really no, unless for some people who are gifted with it. See, when we wake up in the morning, we are more conscious of the bad breath, you know, the smelly, you know, and the sweatiness. Nobody is conscious about the soul, right? Because this is what Professor Latas was saying, and great Muslim scholars were saying, because the world has been brought near to our consciousness. The word dana. The physical sensation is brought close to our consciousness. You see? And it's by virtue of our senses. Bau, smell, the taste and things like that. But for the great people, you and I, we have experienced this, but at the lower level. When you think, you do have that experience of thinking, right? And this is why Heidegger wrote What is Thinking and others have. So this is what I'm trying to explain to you. There are different levels of thinking, and Professor Latas mentioned this, and this is why we have the different levels of, sorry, not different levels, but different faculties associated with the soul. One is called the akal, that uses thinking, the intellection, and the other is the qalb. But then many of us have forgotten the function of the qalb. In fact, we don't think it's very important of it. Most of it, the generality of people think the qalb, the heart, is more of a recipient of emotion, and maybe the cause, K-A-C-A-U-S, the cause of our emotion. Hati gundah gulana, you know. The heart, kalau apa, Santana, Corazon Espinado, you know, the pricked heart. Cour, the French word, cour, is heart. And this is why you have the word encourage, encourage. Encourage. Maknanya to give suggestions to the person with the heart to become strong. That's called encourage, you know. To instill ideas, nasihat, you know, good admonition, so that the heart becomes emboldened and strong. And this is what the Sufis are talking about. Because we are so alive with our mental thing, everything is intellect. And this is what I was saying, that to see, when Professor Latas wrote about that that diagram of the human soul, you have vegetative, you have the animal, then you have the rational, divided into two, human rational and cognitive. The cognitive part is the highest. The cognitive belongs to the qalb. And this is why the higher level of thinking is the higher function of the human soul. The human soul, it's called ruh, spirit. It's called nafs, the soul. It's called akal, the intellect, and it's called qalb. And that's also sometimes we call fu'ad. In the covenants, Prophet has explained all of this. As I said, the ruh is the ground zero. You don't feel it at all, you know. Tapi we always talked about it. It is ruhani, spiritual, you know. Reading is a spiritual activity. Salah is a spiritual activity. You better, as I said, you don't intellectualize your salah, because it requires a different kinds of presence. The requirement there is the presence of the qalb, not the intellect, you know. You don't do i'rab in your Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim while you're reading Fatiha. It doesn't work. This is harful jar, this is, you know, this is inqilab, this, you are doing your passing of the tajweed while you're reading al-Fatiha. That is not salah. You are at least to absorb the meaning, isn't it? No longer intellectualize the meaning. And to do that, you need the qalb to be present. And this is why it's fascinating. For some reason, I don't quite understand, but this is what I wrote in Al-Atas's Psychology. I wanted to resurrect Professor Al-Atas's another great contribution. And this is the function of the qalb. As I said, you know, thanks to my wife, when she was reading the Quran, when we were doing Umrah, she said, hey, Baba, this is what you were saying. Yeah. She found the verse, وَنَزَّلَهُ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ مَنْ كَانَ عَدُوًّا لِجِبْرِيلٍ فَإِنَّهُ نَزَّلَهُ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ. The nazalahu ala qalbika itu is Allah Ta'ala revealed the Quran to the qalb of the Prophet. So the qalb is a faculty of higher function. See? So the wijdan, the intuition of existence occurs at the level of the qalb, not at the level of the intellect. The intellect is at the level of this separation. I see this color, this is different from that, you see? But the sudden understanding of something, see? Otherwise, then, this is why Orientalists and non-Muslims would say the Prophet wrote the Quran using the intellect. But the Quran answered it, you know, Nazzalahu ala qalbika. And this is, as I said, the psychology, the science of psychology among the Muslims. It's not the science of psychology that is now practiced by the West. And this is why we must go back again and deeply rooted this thing properly. And it's very important that this is to me. I remember when I finished reading Prasalata's Prolegomena, because here I mentioned, because the chapter that I want to mention a little bit is the summary of the commentary on the Hujjat al-Siddiq, and the conclusion is from commentary to the Prolegomena, to the metaphysics of Islam, because that's how Prasalata sort of summarize the whole thing. So how we get this is at page 19, Dato Seri.
Yeah.
At the level of how, and I busied Luqman, and because of this, I forgot to bring the pages, Luqman. The attainment of knowledge at the higher level is possible only with the complete annulment of their subjective consciousness. Oh, ini kadang-kadang susah ni. Macam mana? Aku mati dulu ke? No, what it means is that Prasalata explained to me, when you're sitting down, when you're reading, you're so absorbed in being and nothingness of Jean-Paul Sartre, you don't feel your legs. Betul tak? That is an example of a little bit losing of your subjective consciousness. What if you're completely so-called transported in the realm of ideas? It can work, trust me. When people are writing, when people are composing, when people are creative, you know, when doing something, time just went by like that. They don't feel it. Sometimes they don't even want to eat. See? because they're driven by something. That something is what is called creativity. Where does creativity actually it comes from the cult? That's why they're driven. It's not by the intellect. When you ask them, what are you doing? You will see. It's different when it has to do with intellectual work. When you ask Einstein, I'm trying to prove the theory of relativity, because that's intellectual work. When you ask a scientist, and this is why scientists think that they are masters of the universe, because they can make things intellectually understandable. But this is why these people are different kind of masters, isn't it? Yeah. So
Subjective consciousness tu apa?
it means you conscious of yourself. Subject. You are the subject. This is the object. So you're conscious. You're conscious that this, and you're conscious of you. So unless you lose that part, meaning you forgot your feet. So, and Alatas described this as experience stars. Okay, the higher level, when they pass away from the realm of multiplicity. What it means is that when you're so engrossed in something, kadang-kadang you panggil your wife, I tak dengar, I was, you see? Tu. Of course, I have the excuse, I cannot hear. So, you are oblivious to outside nature, right? Whereby they pass away from the realm of multiplicity to that of unity, where they experience the gathering, the seeing and the witnessing with their spiritual organ of cognition. It is the heart, the qalb. All forms of phenomenal world assembling together into a single unified reality. And this is what I corrected in the book by Ainul Qudat Hamadani, and he describes it as such. The experience of gaining this knowledge. By a knowledge, it's called a ma'rifah, which occurs by such force necessitating the gathering together of all forms and their obliteration, such that insofar as forms are negated, but in reality it is real. I know it's difficult, but it's like this. And what I can say is this. I remember, I give you an example. I was teaching Islamic worldview in IIU many years ago. And then after a span of like many years, one student, I was teaching, the student called me. And he said, Dr. Zaini, I am gathering my books from my dormitory because I'm leaving, I finished. I found my old notes. Now it makes sense. When you first hear something difficult, you cannot get it. But your internal faculties, the soul, using the intellect and the qalb, absorbed it. And it remains there because of the faculty al-hafidha, the retentive faculty, the retentive and the recollective faculty, hafidha dhakira. You see? And this is why sometimes, I remember I put the keys over there. See? That's hafidha dhakira. And this is the power of the internal part. You know, the brain cannot do that, but it's the internal part. And this is why, this is what is happening. The Hafiz al-Dhakira collected the forms, not the name actually. And this is why I was trying to explain to you the importance of the ism and musamma, the sifa and the mawsuf. You remember the generality of things. When Ainul Qudat Hamadani describes that all things just becomes obliterated, losing all forms, it means the sifa of those things are completely absolved. Then it recreates something new. And this new thing is what the organ of a spiritual cognition is all about. Then from here, as it works, the intellect is part of it too, but it's at a lower level function. It's just like that Dato Zaini is the case, but at the lower level people are working. You know, he thinks at his level, but whatever he thinks, itu yang kata kadang-kadang pegawai kerajaan ni terima wahyu. Dah faham. See? So the cult is like that. As it works, the intellect has to reorganize itself to receive. That, when the qalb is associated with higher meanings, that is tafakkur. When the intellect is receiving something from the qalb, now that, and then thinks about what to do, that is tadabbur. And this is where the Quran, afala yatadabbaruna al-Quran. Did you not contemplate on the meanings that has been given to you? Not because if you want to understand the meaning higher and deeper, it's called ta'wil, or it's called tafsir. The Quran didn't say that. Afala ta'wiluna al-Quran? No, because the Quran is for our action. You see? And so this is why
you use ma'rifah for two words, knowledge and real.
Yeah, because at that level, to see, when it's level inside, it's no longer ilm, it's the knowledge of the ma'rifah kind.
The real.
Yeah, it's the real kind. The problem is, the Sufis talks about it because they know what it is. As I said, we have not yet gone to that level. That's why we, you sure there are different levels? Yeah. Just like when people talk about mathematics, you know which is real mathematics and hocus pocus kind of mathematics, you know. I don't know, like for example, someone wants to say 1 plus 2 is 3. New kind of mathematics. It doesn't work. Yeah? So anyways, let's go on. I wanted to say the commentary on Hujjat al-Siddiq is generally from page 40 something. 37. Okay. So Professor Latta started that that Hujjat al-Siddiq in 1961, and it was published in 1962, and was printed, and he completed 1962 and was printed in 1966, and then you have Drewes wrote the comments on the re-examination, right? One thing I want to say is, and I think Shukri mentioned this to me, the tradition of writing commentaries. Professor Latta doesn't think highly the idea of being pedantic, meaning trying to find errors here and there and writing so-called an academic article over it. That's not from our Muslim tradition. That's not an intellectual scholarly tradition. The intellectual scholarly tradition is to write commentary, like what he did, to write a summary, a mukhtasar, and to write a rad, a refutation. Of course, I added in here translation, because many of the works of great ulama in the past came by way of translation. And in fact, many great works of the great Sufis also by way of translation to different parts of the Muslim world. All right. I don't think they regard that as something new, because it is part of what they regard as their duty. And this is why, for example, Raniri in this part of the world says that I'm فَأُتَرْجِمَ إِلَى اللُّغَةِ الْجَاوِيَّةِ. You know, I translate this into the language of the Jawi, meaning Malay language. So this is something that we must understand. So it's not so much about creating new ideas, but more on expounding Greek ideas, you see. And one of the things that people tend to criticize is that, you know, our great Muslim ulama in the past wrote commentaries upon commentaries called super commentaries. It is because to show the growth of ideas, really. And this is why if we were to break them up, they become multi-volume. And it's a huge work, seriously, you know. When you saw, we don't have an example here, when you see Muslims' writings, for example, I have a book on Aqidah, Tafsir Zaini's Aqidah from Turkey. You find the text in the middle, the box, and then you have another box outside. There's another writing, and it goes like that, you know. And then you have another on the margin. These are super notes. Super notes. They're writing footnotes. And today we put footnotes, and our footnotes are, I would say, one dimension. You just go down. our scholars in the past, they wrote footnotes, one layer, another layer, another layer. So in one book, you can get 3 books. Yeah. And this is where they say, Bilhamish, this. So that shows intellectual maturity, really. But now the way it is being said, it's just verbose, you know. No, because at the level, you need new findings, new languages are being created, or people understandings of something. So new terms are being coined. And this is what they have to do it. Okay? Reading his commentary, 44, it is evident that Al-Tas providing not just a summary, but an exposition of salient features of the positions of the Sufis on the nature of reality, which he traced back to the school of Junaid. And their school is based on intuition of existence, and that is Wujudiyah. And among the people that are associated with this are Junaid himself, Sarraj, Hujwiri, the author of Kashful Mahbub, Kashful Mahjub, sorry. Kushairi, Risalah Kushairiyah, Abdullah Ansari, Ghazali, and then you have Sadruddin Kunyawi, Razak Kashani, the author of Lataf I'lam. In the epilogue to the commentary, to this one, the epilogue in closing, Rasulullah draws clearly the position of the Sufis of the school of Wujudiyah, Wahdatul Wujud, with regard to the affirmation of realities, which are the manifestation of the different degrees of existence. Okay? And then I said here, he brings forth and evaluates the differing opinions concerning Wahdatul Wujud, and the misunderstanding of the position of Ibn Khaldun with regards to Tasawwuf. Some Western scholars, they use Ibn Khaldun as a source of look for definition of Tasawwuf, what have you. Not good. It's actually Ibn Khaldun is not a big scholar, really. It's just a discovery by the Orientalists, you know. They found it because what happened is there is a tradition in historical writings among the Muslims. And this is something quite interesting. You might want to read the book by Abdul Aziz Duri with a professor in Chicago, Donner. Donner wrote a preface to it. What is it? What is the name of the book? Something literary, a historical writing among the Arabs or something. So what it is that in the tradition of writing history, Muslim has its own tradition. But by the time of Ibn Khaldun, he wrote something where he reassessed the style of writing, the manner of writing, and what the Muslim historians were fall short of, or sometimes making grand claims of something. And this is what Western historian likes, the idea of criticizing, you know, the so-called critical looking at some things. And this is what Prophet was saying. In the tradition, we should look at either making an exposition, the sharah, making a summary, or making a rad. So Khaldun's writing is entirely different. What he sees is that he sees there are some errors in the writings of the reporting of some of the historical events, and some incongruency in terms of data, basically. So he wrote that, and then he wrote about his own general reading of world history, how it developed. All right, so that might be of an interest to the Western scholars, and this is why they call him as such, you know, and rightly so. I think he's more of a sociological, true scholar than more of a historian. Really, his discovery is more on sociology because he reads the behavior of societies. So that's that. Prophet also mentioned that in this book he revisited Iqbal's conception on the nature of God, man, and the universe as outlined in the construction of religious thought in Islam. The thing is, Prophet doesn't agree with the idea of reconstruction of religious thought, the title, because it gives a wrong impression. Why do you reconstruct? First, you think the ideas are so old, they're decrepit, they're broken down, they can no longer hold the weight of present, contemporary, even modern, the word is really modern, challenges of thought. And this is why Professor Latas doesn't like that term, you know, because you reconstruct your paper. That means do it again. That's what it means, reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. Are you going to reconstruct kalam? Are you going to reconstruct tasawwuf? Are you going to reconstruct fiqh? Are you going to reconstruct in Islam tafsir? You're going to reconstruct based on what? And this is why Professor Latas has always been critical of the idea of having a worldview, a framework, you see. So, and this is why he says, and I said, Shukri was asking, what do I mean by triangulating ideas? And this is what it is really. It's not so much reconstructing, it's triangulating the ideas so that you posit it in the right sweet spot where ideas of philosophy, ideas of mysticism, and ideas of kalam come to a congruent point. And that can only be done by one scholar or many other scholars. You see, it's just like you must have a background in physics in order to make breakthrough in physics. You just don't come one day, aha, you know. You must have that, you know. So I found that fascinating. When I was reading it, that was the reconstruction in America, when I was reading, I don't quite understand why. Of course, maknanya the meaning doesn't really hit me until I read this thing again, you know, slowly with Professor Latas's Prolegomena, because what Iqbal was asking, reconstruction of Islamic religious thought, is actually, he's asking, is there a metaphysics foundation of what is this? And this is what Fazlur Rahman said dalam buku dia, Islam and Modernity. He said there lacks of metaphysics in Muslim works. And then, as I said in my Al-Atas's psychology, yeah, I said, you know, independently, Professor Latas started to write Prolegomena to the metaphysics of Islam. See, so that serves as a framework, because Iqbal, Dato Seri, he was in Cambridge, and Cambridge he was in the late early modern period, kan?
20s.
1920, yeah, early modern period. He was seeing steam engines, many kind of scientific discoveries, and this is why, as if scientific ideas are more superior to so-called religious thought. I wanted to say in here that it is not. Raniri, in a very, it's like a subtext, because the way he uses language and the way he describes things are at the forefront. You would read it as religious. You know, this is why I said, you know, when we Muslims, Malays, see Jawi, ini kitab agama. Actually, it's a book on falak. See, for example, and this is why Professor Latas was saying, the Batu Bersurat of Terengganu, people couldn't recognize it because it doesn't have, you know, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
To Jawi.
It's completely related. Tuhan's, dia sebut apa? Dewata Mulia Raya, Rabbul Alamin. And this is, but it's written in Jawi. It's a translation of Rabbul Alamin. So it doesn't sound, the only thing that can be found Arabic, of course, the shape of the letters, but then you have Rajab, and then you have Syaratan, and then you have Rasulullah, then you have Jum'ah. That's it. The rest are all other words, you see. So that's why it's not regarded as agama, you know. And this is what strikes me, because of Dr. Ikhwan's father said, Zaini, that's, you know, astronomy, Professor Latas has calculated, so why don't we verify this thing? Then really it was astonishing for me. How is it that this person can put the moon in the constellation of Syaratan way, you know, before advent of so-called modern astronomy? Then it struck me, in the 13th century, Ibn Battuta was, you know, traveling all to this part of the world, Sumatra, you know, so they know their way around using falak, using astronomy. So they're pretty much ahead of time. So This is why Professor Latta says here, I said, he concludes with a short emphasis on Islamic science and philosophy, which later he wrote. Islam and the philosophy of science. He didn't write Islamic philosophy of science. He's very careful there. Because as I said, if you read it carefully, he doesn't want to trap Islam under falsafa. So he wrote Islam and the philosophy of science. He doesn't write Islamic philosophy of science. It's very difficult. Even students at CASIS find it very difficult when I try to explain this. That's why Professor Atas never say Islamic religion. No, religion of Islam, because Islam gives religion. Otherwise, you give religion an Islamic color. That's where it is wrong. You see? So, he concludes with a short emphasis on Islamic science and philosophy of Islamic science, because they are sciences, ulum, Islamiyah, you see? And the philosophy which he identifies with hikmah and not falsafa. That's what he's about tadi, hikmah. Yeah. The study of nature, he emphasizes, should not be reduced to merely empirical and rational aspects, but it must be integrated into a unified system that discloses the ultimate reality in positive terms. That's why he wrote the positive aspect of tasawwuf. And that it must include metaphysics. See? So I'm not going to go into details of that.
Ada satu istilah yang
Okay.
nombor 6 tu, page 848 tu. Can
Page 48, number 6. Yes.
Yeah.
Archetypal reality.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And the involvement repercussion. Boleh explain
Ah,
sikit tak?
okay. Wait. Before that, we read. Professor Latta summarized the fundamental features of Sufi theology metaphysics in his epilogue of that book, of the commentary, and has discussed and elaborated them on different places in the commentary. And here, there are some of them. Dato is asking about number 6, the meaning of the archetypal realities, a'yanu thabita, or the haqa'iq, and their evolvement, and repercussions, lawazim, in the forms of empirical things. Each have a dual nature characterized by complementary opposites reflecting their sources of origin in the names and the attributes. Okay, now we are getting to the good stuff. You have wujud, Dato Sri. You have wujud existence that belongs to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. It's wujud mutlaq. Then this wujud mutlaq, in order for it to give things like you and me, this book existence, it has to go down, so to speak. Okay? It doesn't go down really. It's just that it's a different level of existence, but not the same level of existence as Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So they say you go down. All right? So in going down, this existence, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, by virtue of His irada and qudrah, His will and power, He gives them their due measure. They are what they are supposed to be, right? And this is why in the Quran, I mentioned this many times. I think Surah Al-Qamar, inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu biqadarin. So we created you in your due measure. Okay. So this, when it is created in their due measure, you become an ain. Aini is an individual. And this is why the process of becoming an individual, the wujud tadi itu, wujud mutlaq, when it wants to become every single a'yan, the plural of ain is a'yan, becoming individuals, things, you, me, everything, they're called a'yan. It has to go through what is called taqayyudat. Taqayyudat means determination. Why it's called determination? You buang D, okay, and you use the word terminate. Terminates means puts limits.
This one lah, sama ni, determination.
Yeah, that's what it is. It has to go through determination. Okay, and this is why when you are determined to become somebody, you focus. You don't do other things. So that's why. So as it goes through the process of taqayyudat, why taqayyudat? Because Allah Ta'ala will ikat. Ikat. It binds you with what is called hukum, the ahkam. And this ahkam, for things which are not sentient beings like us, they become hukum hakam. They become tabi'at. This is why it's called alam tabi'i, because Allah Ta'ala has imprinted, matbu', okay? For us, we are gifted on the physical side, the ahkam. There are governing rules and regulation to our physical body. Terlalu panas tak bagus, too cold not good, just nice, right? But for the spiritual part, Allah Ta'ala did not give hukum. He gives akhlaq. He gives akhlaq. And this is why from your akhlaq we can see your soul, right? Yeah. You have a desire to eat. Everybody has desire to eat because hukum alam. Human being must eat. But some people are considerate. Dia makan, dia kongsi. That is your soul. That is your akhlaq, right? So this is at the very beginning when Allah Ta'ala, see the nature of existence pula, Dato' see, dia ada aspek yang batin dengan zahir. As I said, light, the effect is the zahir. But the unseen is there. But we cannot see. Betul tak? Light is an energy. We don't see energy. You see effects of energy. So we call this light. See? But so that's why existence also we don't see. Just like soul, we say that it exists, but we don't see it. We can see or we can experience the effects. Yeah. Meaning he has a kind soul. He has a very creative soul. He has a very melodious soul. You know, he has a poetic soul. That refers to the soul, but not the tongue. Even sometimes people with challenges, physical, whatever, they can produce things which are so melodious. They can write something so beautiful. Was it Mozart? Beethoven, I think Beethoven, that was hearing impaired, produces the 9th Symphony, which is so nice. You know, I like the part Ode to Joy. It's beautiful, you know. Yeah, you must listen to it sometimes. Full orchestra.
Yeah, yeah.
There was some time in Germany or Korea, they did it with 1,000 singers. Oh, it must be astounding. So that's a'yan, and these are called realities, so to say, because at every process, the unseen, they want to become individual, it's called a'yan. And why it's called a'yanu thabita? Because they are firm in the knowledge of Allah Ta'ala. They are known to Allah, and it's called al-ma'lumat fi ilmillah, ataupun they are called haqa'iq, realities. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, in the book of Aqidah an-Nasafi, I've been saying in the classes and classes, the 3rd article, haqa'iqul ashya' thabita. Haqa'iqul ashya' thabita. The realities of things are affirmed. Wa ilmu biha mutahaqqiqun, and knowledge concerning them can be verified. You see the degrees of existence? Haqa'iq ashya', a'yanu thabita, they affirm in the knowledge of God, but their knowledge, al-ilmu biha, can be verified by us. We can verify them, meaning we can experience them. And this is why, for example, you and I, we can experience each other because we have what I call synchronicity of existence. Allah Ta'ala create you and I living in the same time. Kalau extended period, well, alhamdulillah, you know, we don't live under the time of Nero. You know, or Caesar for that matter, you know, we are living this time. So you see, we are, that is a very stretched out understanding of periodization. But can you imagine the idea of khalq al-jadid at every moment of time that Allah Ta'ala is recreating us? So we have this consciousness because we have synchronous moments of existence. So you, at every moment of your age, when you grow, yeah, and that is called evolvement, because evolvement is from the Latin word volvere. Volvere means to turn. You know the car Volvo, that is.
Yeah.
It's from that word. Tapi evolvement, it means internally driven to revolve, meaning to actualize your what is called the lawazim, the repercussions, what Allah Ta'ala has imprinted upon you. As I said, your akhlaq, as I said, your ahkam. For example, okay, now Zaini, at the age of 60, he loses his hearing. That's my limit, you know. You don't. You can still hear things nicely. So this is what is called repercussion and the evolvement. So, in fact, we don't know what you will become in the future. Tomorrow something might open up for you. We don't know. That's evolvement, you see. And this is why it says here the archetypal realities and their evolvement repercussions in the form of empirical things have their dual nature. Dual nature, hidden and the seen. Hidden and the seen. See? The zahir and the batin aspect. It's always like that. As you grow old, your batin aspect is still there. And you see, and that's why you have an expression in English, the weary soul. You know? And technically speaking, the soul doesn't experience weariness because it belongs to a different world. The weariness is on the physical.
Maknanya soul tu dia tak macam kita lah. Kita, I mean physical,
physical.
kita ada tua kan.
Yeah.
So soul will be, I mean, dia turun naik.
Yeah, it has its own experiences, but it doesn't feel time.
Okay.
That is why sometimes you don't feel, oh, betul tak see? Oh, by here. yeah, with me.
So this, I think this brings us to the question of destiny. When you say
What?
the question of destiny.
Okay.
Destiny.
Because when you say a qadar, meaning what has been imprinted upon us, the evolvement is carrying out what has been imprinted, like a
The manifestation of what has been imprinted upon you.
like a program. So it will go. You have been born, and then you are young, and then teenager. You will go. That is beyond our power. It will follow what God has instructed it to do, but with regards to.
But you must put effort to it.
Yeah, but upon us is how we respond to each turn of the evolvement. That is our akhlaq.
Yes.
How we respond when we get old. Do we become more happy, more pleased with what God has said to us, or we become miserable that we reject such? Then that what's happened when people become kufur.
Yeah, that is why the nature of worldview and the aqidah is very important. You see, I forgot the sayings. You know how beautiful the life of a Muslim is. Whatever befalls him is something that Allah has given, and if he's thankful of it, it will give him more. Doesn't mean that if you have a difficulty, you will get more difficulty. Allah Ta'ala will open up. وَيَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. يَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. So when anything that befalls you, and you just that this is Allah Ta'ala. So remember, good or bad, we call good and bad because you see, we are so much subsumed with our Western ideas that bad is bad, right? But for us, bad is ibtila. Ahasiban nas an yaqulu amanna wa hum la yuftanun. Do people think that they're going to claim themselves as believers without being tested? Yeah. So for us, this is the worldview of us. You see, that this life is a test. The test is for becoming better, not becoming worse. It doesn't work at all. Yeah. Even you consider in old age, some people becomes miserable. Why? They cannot live life according to their youthful state. No, because this is why in Islam you have stages. Like there are things that you can do at old age. For example, there'll be more dhikr, because dhikr is more embodiment of thankfulness. That's why young people don't like to do dhikr after salah. Get up, go, But the old people, they like to stay. But yeah, and this is tasawwuf must be. You can start them young, but it will become even more forceful, meaningful, and experiential as you grow in age. That's why they say even Ibn Taymiyyah turns to become Sufi at the end of his life. Yeah, because there's so many deep thought that goes into it, and again, as I said, deep thought, unfortunately, has been somehow given to the intellect. But when you do dhikr, you don't dhikr with the intellect. You don't use your intellect when you dhikr, isn't it? Otherwise, this is why then they say, your salah is an intellectual. Of course, it's not intellectual effort. It's meant for something else, another side of human nature that we must give it life. You see? Right? Thank you, Zaini. So, by complementary opposites, reflecting their source of origins in the names and attributes of Allah Ta'ala. And this is why, as I said, we have been imprinted by the akhlaq on the spiritual side, and we've been imprinted with ahkam on the physical side. The nature of the spiritual side is such that when Allah Ta'ala says, khalaqa Adam ala suratihi, He created Adam in his form, in his image. It's not the image. Surah here refers to his names and attributes. Because his names and attributes are so-called forms, but they don't have forms. See, this is the meaning that we have to understand, you see. It is an aspect. So, khalaqa Adam ala suratihi, meaning Adam carrying on the aspects that Allah Ta'ala has imprinted upon him. See? And this is why we are called, among the whole world is called madhar, you know, a dhil. Dhil.
Yeah.
It's a shadow. It's a reflection. So we have a little bit of that. So the whole world, the macrocosm, man has a little bit of that. It's called microcosm.
Kalau saya can ask a very simple question. Professor Syed Hossein Nasser with the Islamic doctrine on cosmology. Because I find it difficult to understand cosmology bila banyak sangat pandangan kan. So what is your general comment with regards to wujudiyah?
His Islamic cosmological doctrines is basically, it's a collage. He mixes all these things, primarily because the way he approached it, because I read this book long time ago, Islamic cosmological doctrine. He tries to bring everything under what he calls Islamic understanding of cosmology. So part of it has the empirical part of it has so-called spiritual part of it has a little bit of what he can derive from so-called Greek remnants through, for example, the Ikhwanus Safa. Now, this is where, if you want to really unravel this thing, you read Professor Latas's work, because it's fascinating. It just makes it so clear. Why I say this? Because, again, why it's called Islamic cosmological doctrines is that what is it that we must understand is doctrines. That means you cannot change it, right? It's doctrinal. It's part of the Aqidah. And that's what it means. The Muslims' Aqidah regarding the nature of the world, to put it nicely, you know. So, nature of the world for us is that, first, there are alameen, there are parallel existences, okay? Sarwa alam berganda. There's a God that commands different levels of the world. And then levels of the world, of course, we cannot talk about the angels because we don't know anything about their world except their names. Shaitan, Iblis, we don't know anything but except their name. And we may just cast them in a world that is unseen, right? That's the way unseen. But then you go back at the physical world, there are small, small worlds, and this is why in there you will see what does Ikhwan as-Safa say about small, small things. And this is why you read, for example, one of the book that I tried to translate, Risala fil I'tiqad al-Hukama, a treatise on the belief of the philosophers. They were talking, Dato, in their discussion, chemistry and physics. It's interesting. Risala fil I'tiqad al-Hukama. You see, so this is basically cosmological doctrines in Islam. What is it? That when you heat water, it can gather the heat and turn into gas. It's in the book of Surawardi, 13th century. So you can see they know about scientific thing, and it's already part and parcel of the Aqidah. What it means is that there's part of scientific, empirical science going on. Cuma we have not yet been able to sort of discuss this in a manner that is contemporary. So we relegate it as if, this is old, understanding is the language is old, things like that. Well, look, Ibn Haytham, 12th century, suddenly, a couple of years ago, they decided to make him the father of modern optics. So it's not, as I said, sometimes ideas are not old. They don't grow old. Why? Because ideas comes from the soul, Dato' Sri. The soul is ageless.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
from intellect.
Yeah. So what you conceive in your mind has no age. Sometimes you fashion it becomes so more perfect than it was before. So then you produce it in terms of a book. But then the book, after 5 years dah nampak tua lah lama. Because this is the realm that Allah Ta'ala has put the dimension of time and space.
Okay, we have another half an hour, please. Any questions for discussion, clarity? Ya, sila. Zul.
Sama. Do you want to pass the mic?
Yes, please. Kan tak dengar.
Soalan ni dia sensitif sikit lah. Pertikaian atau pertembungan wahdatul wujud dengan wahdatul syuhud yang Ansuri dengan Raniri ni, dia menjadikan kita ni keliru sikit. Orang awam macam kita kan, sebab kita mungkin tak mengaji banyak kan. Tapi mengikut analisa kita, orang biasa ni, bila benda tu dibahaskan semakin tinggi, dia menjadi semakin bukan bermasalah, dia jadi macam manfaat. Satu lagi, mudarat. Mudaratnya ialah bila Raniri menghukum Ansuri zindik, kan? Tapi ada yang membelanya dan dia pun sendiri menghujah. Tapi pokoknya sudah jatuh hukum. Kan? Jadi perbincangan yang tinggi itu pada tahap-tahap tertentu telah menyebabkan satu kemudaratan kepada ialah masyarakat. Mengikut Raniri mengatakan demikian, mengikut Ansuri dia kata no. Jadi berlaku pertembungan. Ini mudarat yang berlaku akibat daripada perbahasan yang sedemikian. Kan? Jadi kalau kita berbalik kepada filosofi agama Islam itu, Tuhan menjadikan agama ni mudah. Kan? Jadi kita kadang-kadang memayahkan, menyusahkan lagi. Kan? Jadi mungkin juga perbahasan-perbahasan begini sepatutnya dia ada satu, bukan etika, ada satu guidelines. You discuss setakat ni saja. Jangan pergi lebih. Kalau lebih dia jadi mudarat. Jadi dia kemungkinan jadi sesat, sebab kalau dia jatuh hukum kafir atau zindik itu salah seorang mesti jadi. Segi akal kita kan, kalau kamu kata saya kafir, kalau kamu tak kafir saya kafir. Jadi itu akibat dia. Jadi dia berkait dengan akidah kan, sebab tauhid. Jadi kalau keseluruhan Al-Quran pun saya tidak mengkaji secara detail, tapi saya rasa dalam pembacaan ayat-ayat berkaitan ketauhidan itu tidak memonopoli ataupun tidak macam menjadi satu bahan utama, sehingga setengah ayat itu berkaitan dengan tauhid. Kan? Ayat banyak berkaitan dengan hubungan kemanusiaan, solving the problem of the community, hubungan kemasyarakatan. Jadi kalau saya mengambil satu hadis Nabi yang berbicara tentang Nabi bertanya kepada sahabat tentang apa yang patut buat dalam satu hari. Contoh katakan hadis Nabi bertanya kepada sahabat, kan, hari ini siapa yang berpuasa? Maka sahabat kata, saya, Abu Bakar kata, saya yang berpuasa. Soalan kedua, siapa yang menziarahi orang sakit? Soalan ketiga, siapa yang beri makan orang lapar, orang miskin? Dan seterusnya, siapa yang pergi ziarah orang mati? So kalau dari segi menafsirkan, soalan itu ialah Nabi checking sahabat-sahabat ni, what do you do today? So 3 atau 4 perkara, 3 itu adalah berkaitan dengan hubungan dan menyelesaikan masalah-masalah yang berkaitan dengan Tuhan. Satu daripada 4. Meaning, mesejnya ialah sometimes kita kita membahaskan sesuatu yang dia bagus, tetapi dia tidak mendasar kepada hakikat peranan manusia sebagai khalifah menyelesaikan masalah-masalah umat ini. So you minta komen dari segi degree of what we should I mean, yalah, ini scholars lah. Ini isu scholars. Saya orang bawah, kita tak apa nak kisah sangat. The scholars, kadang-kadang scholars, bukan kita kata scholars tak betul. Macam sini je, Malaysia segini pun. Scholars of the politics make people more confused.
Ya, betul.
Kan? Ahli-ahli ilmuwan politik ataupun orang yang mengamalkan politik menyebabkan orang lebih keliru. Padahal it's very simple. Politik menguruskan kemaslahatan rakyat. You tumpu menyelesaikan masalah rakyat lah. Tapi dibahas, jadi keliru. Syahid tak syahid, jihad tak jihad, kita pun tak tahu. Wallahu alam.
Thank you. It's a good question. Yeah, there are limits to discussion of this. In history, what I know, there are many others perhaps. There are 3 of them who were put to death because of their excessiveness. Not discussing, exposing discussions to the public because they did not know the limits of it. For example, Al-Halaj. And Raniri in his book Lataif mentioned that for any tasawwuf aspirant who wants to go deep into this, first you must have a strong founding in Sharia, in fiqh. If you not, then it's like what happened to Halaj. Because Halaj exposes something that can confuse people. And that is why for him the judgment of death was agreed upon by even Sufis, like Raniri. The second one, Ainul Qudah Hamadani, I mentioned in this book. He was also put to death by his, because excessiveness. Although their theoretical understanding of this experience are good, that's okay. Third, Surawardi al-Maktul. Surawardi al-Maktul, you see, the one that I mentioned. Because people don't know how, this is why Raniri is trying to do not bring this discussion at the level that can confuse public. Hafzan Fasari and his students, Sumatrani, has done that. And this is why him functioning as the Shaykhul Islam in Aceh, Qadi Qudah at that time, he has to put a stop to it. And he has to answer them. And this is why we need expert in this field, because today, the nature of existence, too many Western existentialists among so-called Muslim intelligentsia who don't understand the concept of existence, you know. For example, someone who says, I'm a Muslim, I have a right to say what Islam is. He's training in sociology. He doesn't even know Arabic. Oh, but I'm a scholar too, you see. Nobody who's trained in orthopedics would work on the heart. But they want to do that on Islam. You see? And now, you know, there are so many things. So this is why we must put things in the right places. Persalatas was saying, and this is correct. So we must know the limits. And I think because at this level, people are, alhamdulillah, you know, more, not, but they want to know what this is. So I have to explain. And this is why we must understand the contribution of our scholars in the past. And the good thing what Raniri did was to put a stop to it, you see. Yeah, people defended, like people defended Halaj, people defended Sorawardi, people defended Ainul Qudah Hamadani. And we do not negate their works. Zubdatul Haqa'iq is a very good work, you know. And then, as I said, Risalah fil I'tiqadil Hukama is a very good work. So we must be able to distill them. But what they have done, if they are wrong, we must correct that. Because Sharia, when it comes to the public, the Sharia takes precedence. See? Because we judge on actions. We don't judge on intention, you know. Perhaps maybe differently when it comes to murder. You know, murder with intention is the first degree. But you judge on the action, betul tak? Because there is not without intention, kan? So it's a different matter. So I think we cannot sweep the thing under the rug. We must handle it. We must face it, and we must, alhamdulillah, at least keep this thing alive. I know at some works of this nature, Jakim wants to declare haram, but if we have no expert in this thing, Dato' Seri, we have no expert on people who are experts on the diseases of the pigs, diseases of the things about haram stuff, then we rely on people who are not, isn't it? And the same thing I wanted to say, a lot of works now today, because here's what happened now. Many of us go to the West to study, Dato' Seri. Not only in Malaysia, in Indonesia, wherever, because we think that. So some of us go and study and we read them in English. We find translation of the Quran in English, the Muwatta in English. So we think scholars who write in English is more true, more real, more believable, you know. My experience of these things, I'm sorry, my experience of these things, sometimes reading Orientalist work, they're good. Tapi when you want to get to like Professor Latas was saying, and I want to show you here. Yeah?
Ish.
Because Dreyfus attacked him in this book. Page 76. In his reputation against Dreyfus, with a great aplomb and panache, he refers to the knowledge that he possesses, Professor Latas, as a matter of basic knowledge. That's why I think at the age of 20-something, he can write this thing. He understands. Whose knowledge is not merely gathered from books, but more from the experience and reflection. Whose insight into it is not merely a matter of academic preoccupation, but a matter of belief and faith and definite commitment to a particular attitude towards life. For, unbeknownst to Dreyfus, Alatas is not merely a nominal Muslim. Many of us are just nominal Muslim and read about Islam in English and other languages that we are confident with, but never Kitab Jawi, because we buta Jawi. Yeah. Because he is brought up and nurtured in a milieu alien to Dreyfus. Alatas is, after all, this is his own statement, studying and reflecting upon his own culture and tradition and religion, which are for him familiar and coherent. The coherency part too. Because many Orientalists see things incoherent in Islam. But for us, it's coherent. Because unlike Dreyfus, he has smelled the breath of a Sufi. And he not only comes from a family of Sufis, but is directly descended from generations of ancestors who were Sufis and saints, scholars and savants of Islam, stretching over 1,000 years. See? He was saying, you know, my blood runs tasawwuf, and the blood runs the blood of the Prophet. So, this is what we must acknowledge. And Alhamdulillah, among us, there are still people who carry this tradition, you see. And it is fascinating. The growth of this book later on, which I want to end a little bit, Dato Sri nanti, is something what Professor Latas wants to put as something called the scientific tradition, what Professor Pasalan tried to carry, but in a historical study. Because his scientific development means the development of knowledge, not science, you see. Because, as I said all the time, what is the purpose of being human is to complete ourselves, right? To complete our nature is to complete it by way of knowledge, you see. Unlike Aristotle, you see. Aristotle talks about what is the purpose of man. It's happiness. You you know, and at the end, to be happy, you have to have friends, you have to have some wealth, you have this and that. What? For us, because our definition of being man is different, you see. This is why Sartre has a problem of either being or nothingness. Ours, wujudiyah, our existence is already known. وَسَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, you know. We have named you as Muslim. You submit to Allah Ta'ala. So what is your purpose? Your purpose is not to be happy in the sense of materially happy, physically happy. Your purpose is a happiness in obedience to God. That is our purpose of life, you see. So the scientific development is for our purpose of being complete. And which is the earlier part, the evolvement of our lawazim, you see. Because whatever it is, you can return back by virtue of knowledge. Yeah? And your manifestations basically by knowledge. You are driven by knowledge, and that's what it is. See? So this is why all levels of existences we must have knowledge of, at the level of physical, empirical, at the level of unseen, the study of light, macam Dr. Imran belajar photonics, fiber optics, or whatever, you know, things that cannot be seen, you know. You must learn, and you must learn also the way to write the best prosody, you know, poetry, because it's the nature of human being. And then you have to write the way to write properly. You know, you can have the best AI machine, but it's still the man that has to write the codes. Yeah, because human language advances. AI depends on the coding of human language. You don't put it, it will never get it. It will not create its own language. It may, but it is dated. See? And this is why you have dulu basic, Pascal, Fortran, C++. Now, different. You know, Linux lah, apa lah, whatever. You know, I don't know. It's beyond me now.
Okay, ada soalan?
Is that okay?
Sila.
Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, Smite, yeah.
Short answer pun okay. Bismillah. I just want to verify something related to AI. Yeah. So
Oh,
something
you're the AI person. It's a mistake.
yeah. No, for my own reflection lah. Something that do not have certain faculties would not have the capacity of doing something that they do not possess. So by that logic, and also problem that could arise from that, could we say that it is impossible to create a machine like human, because machine do not have call, soul, whatever. So that is the first part. But also to put some context to my question is, in the West, they have this problem where they want to give AI agency. So that's also another thing why they have, such regard to give existence to machines.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you, Prof.
Two questions. The question number one is, it is possible. This is why if you read again Haludil, this is what Raniri is saying. When you see a product, he says a patung, there's the ability to speak, ability to this, to do that. It's a reflection of the Creator. It's just like us, you see. Allah Ta'ala created us, as I say, ala suratihi. So we have his so-called the dhil, the shadow of his sifa. But now some of us think that there's no God. So it's possible to create a machine. But will the machine have an identity? No. It will not be conscious of itself, except that the identity that you have given to it. See? And I don't know if it has the ability to evolve in the sense of creating its own language. You see, if two machines talking to each other, can they exchange meaning? You see, right now AI are basically automatons. You ask it to write on the computer, you can say, okay, this is my review of the article. But can you put AI discussing with each other? No. You have this big blue computer, I think the one that played chess. Big Blue. Deep, is it? Deep Blue, yeah. But that's because all the moves known then have been programmed. And it is coded in it that if the move is this, it thinks like heuristically, but given a time period. But is it conscious? No, it is not. Because it's still a machine. We think that it is conscious. Just like, for example, you look these auto drive cars, because you give it, but it's
You give input.
Can you find it guilty in court when it hits someone?
Cari dia punya designer. Siapa yang program kan tu?
Because in the court they will have something called habeas corpus. You have to bring the body, but the car has no body.
Pakai AI.
And this is why that is the other side of the moral impediments of AI.
Yeah.
You send a drone that can kill someone, shoot someone, whatever, and it can be automatons, you know. You can program to see. So who's responsible to do that? We leave it to the moralists and the ethicists to think about, you know.
So please conclude. So we have a closing.
Oh, terima kasih, Dato. Seri. I think this is a wonderful book. It has helped me a great deal in preparing my PhD thesis and understanding the great ideas of the Muslim, a section of Muslim intellectuals called Ahlul Tasawwuf, and I can see the repercussions that has gone to it, and this is why I think we must not cast aside Jawi manuscripts or any of the Jawi books in the past, what is known as Kitab Kuning, or any manuscript works that are, you know, for example, they are found in some libraries or in some obscure places in some of our ancestors' home or whatever. Their language may be quaint, may be old, but their content is something very precious, and this is why we need experts in them. It is something that we must keep alive, all right? It is something that is a challenge to us, because I remember when I was, I approached Datin Zarina or Datuk Zarina, the chair of Warisan Negara, Jabatan Warisan Negara, because she wanted to publish the book Terengganu, Batu Bersurak Terengganu, the grey book there. I said, we miss one major aspect of warisan in our country, intellectual warisan, because we think heritage is only buildings, artifacts, and this is why Kitab Jawi is not because can you imagine? And the scholars behind them, we don't know where to put them because they don't belong to museums. They belong to the library. But once you have books in the library, it is good as gone, buried. But when you have heritage, you paint them, you remodel them, you reconstruct them, you give them budgets, you know, to keep it alive. But how many people wants to keep ideas of Raniri alive, ideas of Ash'ari alive, that we regard, but now we regard them as old, you know, antiquated, of no use. But it's part of our intellectual heritage. That part is missing, Dato' Sri. It's unfortunate, I said. And so much so that that's why we don't know who's who in our parts of the world. So I hope this little effort that we do here can somehow add to that effort. Thank you, Dato' Sri.
Terima kasih, Prof. Zaini. Ada dua perkara saya nak sebutkan. Pertama sekali ada buku baru ditulis oleh Dr. Khalif Muammar, Etika Alam Sekitar dalam Islam, newly published by UTM. Oh, my name at the back. Okay. Yang kedua, next event will be, I hope we can do it on the 21st of September. I thought I mentioned to you earlier, but I tengok ni tak hantar message lagi.
Oh no, I haven't.
21st, yeah.
21st. Tapi what book we have to decide?
What book we want to discuss? Yeah. Ataupun kita panggil Prof. Khalif, then let him present this book and then we discuss this book together. Yeah.
I think that's good.
21 tu maknanya lebih awal, selalu kita buat minggu yang keempat kan. Ini minggu yang ketiga, sebab 22 tu saya insyaAllah scheduled to travel to Boston dan so nice. Saya dalam cuba menghabiskan cuti.
Oh,
ya, cuti wajib. Cuti
tahunan.
125 hari lagi. Oh.
Yeah. Last month you said it was 260 something.
Days to finish.
Days to finish. This is cuti that I can take if allowed lah. Tapi yang pergi Boston tu dah lulus, jadi I better take that as opportunity. Nice. Hopefully kita boleh jumpa 21 bulan dan kita baca buku ni lah. Buku ni ada kat sini. Minta siapa yang berminat untuk dapatkan buku ni daripada Syukri pernah jual. I've gone through the book because I read the book and then give some remarks on the book. I think it's good. book for us to understand the problems of environment from Islamic perspective. Ya, kalau tidak nanti kita hanya nampak isu-isu yang berkaitan dengan orang tiba-tiba seorang wanita 48 tahun tiba-tiba tenggelam dalam itu. But please we have some explanation from Islamic perspective tentang tanggungjawab kita dan sebagainya. Ya, dan akhir sekali terima kasih Prof Zaini. Ya, I want to present you a book that I dah pegang buku ni lama tapi this is Simfoni Sungai.
Oh.
Oleh Zaini Ujang dan Lim Swee Ting. This is a poems. Lim Swee Ting is very remarkable, well-known
Poet.
poet.
Terima kasih.
It's about river,
Yeah.
sebab sungai.
Yeah. The illustrations are nice. By who?
Ada seorang artis yang tu.
Salim, Haji Salim.
Yeah. And the other one is about this lah, giant caves.
Oh, this is
of
Nia.
Mulu. Yeah, this is very
Oh,
good.
Gunung Mulu. Nia Caves.
Mulu.
Mulu.
Dia sungai Mulu Cave.
Nia Caves kat mana?
Ya, kira dekat Sarawak juga.
Sarawak
Tapi,
juga.
it's very nice. Nanti selain daripada kita naik basikal, I think I want to go to caves dan sebagainya.
Wow.
When I have more time.
Splunking.
Okey, terima kasih. Kita ada jamuan sikit. Terima kasih kepada mereka yang mengikuti kita. Oh, kita ada tetamu baru ni, Azmi Akil. Yeah, he just came back from Harvard. And he hosted Dr. Helmi in 2022. So welcome to the group. So we organize this every month, so you are welcome. Terima kasih kepada semua. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih.
Saya nak suruh Dr. Ulai ni.
Oh, yang mana?
Ni, baca ni. Ni, siapa nak buku ni?
1959
Kita lah.
Keluar masuk.